So, I'm figuring this out. If this is hot garbage, I apologize. This is first one. We will dial it in the future. But I am going to start this up with a research stream. And Lempa, who is my friend in my game, is wanting me to go through the Cadians versus Death Corps in 40k, which is a very near and dear series to my heart. A little bit of a nerd for Space Marine too, and I think I might play a little bit later. I don't know, but we're gonna watch a Cadian shock troop video.
Hi friends, today is a very special episode because we're talking about my favorite and the objectively best guard,
Tried to at the very
the
least.
Cadian
It might
shock
screw up.
troopers.
Who knows?
Cadians are the poster boys of the Imperial Guard, and for good reason. Everyone thinks they're just boring, vanilla.
Oh, I guess I should say I have a little bit of background with 40k. I've watched a lot of videos on the lore between multiple different factions, and my favorite one is the Grey Knights because I'm an edgy boy. But I do know the Death Corps of Krieg quite a bit. The Death Corps comes from the planet of Krieg, and they have been bred for war. They're pretty much only export out of the planet Krieg, from my understanding, is soldiers, and they're the fancy gas mask boys. But all I really know about Cadia and the Cadian shock troops, at least for this video, I don't know if it's different specifically, but I know a little bit about the fall of Cadia and how well regarded the soldiers of Cadia are. But yeah, I'm gonna give all of my stuff at the very end.
Flamos that represent the guard, but they're actually super cool. They're the poster boys for a reason, and goddammit, vanilla's a good flavor. Also, be prepared. This is my favorite faction. So, if you ever went to a Krispy Kreme and watched the donut making process, well, you know that funky little step after the fryer? Yeah, that's exactly what this video is going to be for roughly 15 minutes. So, without further ado, let's get right Cady into it.
Yeah.
The Cadian shock troopers are the elite guardsmen who originated from the lost world of Cadia. They are one of the best, if not the best, warriors in the entire Imperium. The world of Cadia was not always like.
Also, to anybody watching the stream, or anybody that is going to be looking at this video later, you will probably hear a baby in the background. He's fine, I promise. He's just very screamy, and he's going through the dinosaur phase. So try and ignore it the best you can. At some point in the future, I will be changing my setup, so I won't be around the baby during streams as much. But I will probably be putting lives out a little bit later. Yeah. Do you have something you want to say to everybody? You're interrupting the stream. Okay. Anyway, sorry.
Lost, and before it fell, it was the mightiest fortress world after Holy Terra itself. And before it was the mightiest fortress world after Holy Terra itself, it was just a middling fortress world, presumably also less mighty than Holy Terra. And before it was a middling fortress world, presumably also less mighty than Holy Terra, it was a filthy, degenerate world full of filthy, degenerate Chaos worshippers. But the Chaos cultists fortunately went extinct with the help of some cyclonic torpedoes, and that cleared the way for the Imperials to establish Cadia into a legendary fortress world we knew and loved prior to its tragic fall.
For those that don't know 40k lore very well, the Reclamation was part of the Crusades, and that pulled in thousands of planets, tens of thousands of planets, and trillions of lives. Also extinguished quite a few along the way. But especially with Chaos, you have to wipe it out. And back then, they didn't know what Chaos was. But they knew it wasn't right, so nuke it. Nuke it from orbit.
Cady and the Cadian shock troopers' claim to fame was guarding the entrance to literal space hell for damn near 10,000 years. Since they were tasked with defending the only good passage out of the Eye of Terror, the Cadians developed a strong warrior culture and became some of the greatest guardsmen ever. every part of Cadian culture and society was militarized. Their government was based on military merit, their cities were labyrinthine fortresses, and their child soldiers were even younger than the average Imperial child soldier. Woohoo! You see, many guardsmen begin their training in their teens. In contrast, pretty much the instant they're able to, Cadian children are taught how to fight. They're commonly said to be able to strip and shoot lasguns before they could even write. That means we got little Cadian Tim over here casually shooting assault rifles at age 5. This also means that the age that most other guardsmen would start their training, Cadians have over a decade of experience. Then, after their extensive childhood training, every teenager is sent to serve in the White Shields platoon for further training. Presumably, they're called the White Shields because it's a platoon of pubescent teenagers. Here, they do live fire practice, field training exercises, and have core Cadian values instilled in them. Cadian culture highly emphasizes marksmanship, discipline, teamwork, and of course the other Imperial values like self-sacrifice, resilience, extreme xenophobia, etc., etc. Additionally, somewhat uniquely, they're given a basic education on chaos and the perils of the warp. This gives them a rather unique resistance to chaos taint and a greater resolve in battle. And their training is
It's super important being next to the Eye of Terror. For those that don't know and didn't hear just before, demons and the forces of hell basically constantly pour forth from the Eye of Terror. It's in space. They don't need spaceships. They will just be on your planet. With Cadia being so close and it being such a constant fight, it was always very difficult to keep any fortress world very nearby. The fall of Cadia was a super significant event in the 40k lore. I'm wondering if he's going to actually get into the fall of Cadia or if he's just going to explain like the military structure of the Cadian faction in 40k, but we'll see in a minute.
Some of the highest quality training in the entire Imperium. So every Cadian shock trooper is roughly at the level of a special forces operative from our world, if not better. Speaking of better, the White Shields who show the most promise are sent to the even top of the line training in order to become the coolest dudes in the galaxy, the Kazarkin. Woo! More on them later. So, after their time in the White Shields, Cadian is trained to be a proper shock trooper and then sent to various battlefields to fight for the glory of the Imperium. Furthermore, Cadian officers are all promising White Shields or veterans who rose to the ranks through battlefield feats. They find the idea of an officer learning stuff in school, like a nerd, rather than in battle, to not only be dumb, but also silly. But speaking of officers, you know what officers tend to do? They dispense tactics like some kind of tactic dispensing machine of some sort. Cadians, they have some of the best tactical minds in all of the Guard. Legendary commanders like the Ultra Mega Chad, Lord Castellan, Ursarkar Krieg, his daughter Ursula Krieg, and the indomitable Knight Commander Pask all hail from the world of Cadia. But beyond that, what tactics do these tactical geniuses tactic with? Well, the Cadian shock troopers are one of the few regiments trusted to field combined arms regiments. You see, after the heresy, the armies of the Imperium were highly segmented so that no one regiment would have the means to rebel and cause major damage like Mr. Heresy did. This is why the Space Marine legions were broken into smaller chapters. This also means that usually Guard regiments are highly specialized. For example, artillery, tanks, and infantry would all be separated in their own regiments and made to work with the others. However, due to the importance of their job and their legendary track record, the Cadians are allowed to field combined arms regiments that are more readily able to respond to threats. A typical Cadian regiment will have a corps of shock troopers supported by tank, artillery, and other special companies. This makes for an extremely efficient fighting force with unparalleled cohesion and flexibility since every battlefield role is under the same regimental command. Castellan Krieg's personal regiment, the Cadian 8th, is the epitome of Cadian combined arms tactics, and they continue to kick ass after nearly being wiped out in the 13th Black Crusade and losing Lord Castellan Krieg. Then, on a smaller scale, Cadian tactics revolve around coherent shock trooper squads, flanking enemy positions, holding objectives, and basically whatever else is needed. The Cadians' focus on squad cohesion and a tactical approach means that they're generally more efficient man for man. These squad tactics also mean that Cadians have an abnormally high survival rate and have the highest amount of veterans of all the Guard regiments. Which,
from my understanding, is the complete opposite of the Death Corps. The Death Corps is they don't actively sacrifice themselves, but sacrifice is the most sought after aspect of honor for them. Like, sacrifice is duty. So there seems to be a little more self-preservation, at the very least, with Cadians.
So, knowing 40k, that's probably like 10 guardsmen. Just kidding, I low-key hate the guardsmen all being useless meatbags who last 5 seconds and then die memes. Some can be useless meatbags, but not all of them, please. Cadians also specialize in urban warfare and shock tactics. Big shocker there. But their biggest strength is that they're the jack-of-all-trades regiment, able to do pretty much anything well. So I guess Cadians specialize in adaptability and, well, being the best. Which I suppose specializing in being generalized isn't really a specialization. Or it might be. I don't know. Feel free to call me a dum-dum fool and tell me why Krieger specializing in banging shovels is just so much better in the comments below. But, of course, at the end of the day, Cadians are guardsmen and they're willing to sacrifice themselves to protect the Imperium. In the face of hopeless odds, Cadians stand defiant and will fight till the very end. Hell, they literally lived at the gate of space hell for 10 millennia. The planet broke before the Guard did is a literally true statement. But on the other end of the cannon fodder spectrum, let's talk about the Cadian Special Unit. That's right, we're back to the coolest dudes ever, the Kazarkin. The Kazarkin are the best troopers of the best regiment of the best faction. I made a whole video about Imperial Stormtroopers, but the basics are that the Kazarkin are the elites of the Cadians and are either talented and promising white shields or veteran shock troopers who receive extra training and better equipment to kick extra ass. Kazarkin originated as the key protectors of Cadian fortress cities called Khazars, but now they fight across the galaxy as the best soldiers a regular human can possibly be. They've got literally peak strength, peak speed, peak reflexes, and peak combat intellect. They're only second to Space Marines, but they still get Space Marine jobs done, and they efficiently kill Marines. Speaking of killing, they typically...
Also, I'm so sorry. I just realized that I haven't had my cam up this entire time, and I'm a little bit of a dum-dum. But that's probably best anyway. I've been looking down at the baby, and he's been making noises. Yeah. Yeah, you. Yeah. Hi. Interrupting the video. Okay. Anyway, back to the video. Now cam's up. Apologies. We're learning.
They carry hell guns or hotshot las guns if you're lame, which are basically upcharged las guns that can punch through most armor like it's, some easily meltable thing. I don't know. I probably could have figured out a butter analogy, but it's okay. They also commonly take special weapons like plasma, melta, grenade launchers, volley guns, and more depending on the mission. And just like their mother regiment, the Kazarkin are super versatile and basically do whatever task is needed from them. They can provide heavy firepower on the front lines, serve as rapid assault drop troopers, or carry out spec op missions in elite kill teams. Kazarkin are respected across the galaxy, and they're even requested by Inquisitors, Rogue Traders, Imperial Lords, and other notable figures to serve as their bodyguards or elite strike teams. And these notable figures need to be deemed worthy of the Kazarkin working for them. Yeah, they don't need a test if the Kazarkin are qualified to work for them. They need to be deemed worthy of the Kazarkin service. Badass. And fun cherry on top is that this little lore fact made the ridiculous difficulty buying Kazarkin the year of release lore accurate. Perhaps you simply weren't worthy of having a Kazarkin kill team in your service, and that's why GW wouldn't let you spend your 60 buckaroos on one.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, if they're the best, they're gonna cost a little bit more. We're just gonna move past that fact. They're not the best. At least in my opinion.
On top of the Kazarkin, Cadians also have a special pattern of Sentinel that has extra armor, and their shock troops favor grenade launchers and autocannons for their versatility. But finally, the big question. Why do I think that the Cadians are the best? Well, because they literally are. Jokes aside, though, Cadians are probably the single best regiment across the board due to the simple fact that they're just so dang versatile. You can drop them on literally any battlefield and they'll get the job done. Yeah, Cadian are badass and probably have the strongest guard characters around, but put them in the flat hellhole that is the American Midwest, and I don't think their Rambo guerrilla antics will work all that well. Valhallans, they're super cool, pun intended, but put them in the blazing desert and they'll make like a hiker visiting Vegas. That's to say they'll have a heat stroke and demonstrate why Death Valley is called Death Valley. Or drop a Krieger in a therapist's office. And I don't know, they'd probably self-implode. The Cadians' versatility is invaluable to an empire as large as the Imperium. They have about 1 million worlds, one bad day away from being eaten by aliens, indoctrinated by Satan, or even just discovering the far-flung concept of worker rights. So, having a regiment that can effectively fight on any world with relatively short notice is a huge and necessary asset. That's why across the galaxy, many regiments treat the Cadians as an aspirational regiment and try to model their doctrines and equipment after the shock troops. Not because they're the absolute best at everything, but because they're good enough at anything. It's good to have specialists, but you need the generalists to keep things together.
That is one thing I know from the lore as well. Most people confuse Cadians with just the regular military of the 40k universe. I mean, obviously the Space Marines are the most iconic, but you can't ever forget that the military arm of the Imperium is the by far and away most prominent. For every Space Marine, there's thousands of guardsmen. But I've met a lot of people that have talked about 40k and they don't know the difference either. At one point in time, I didn't either, to be fair. But that's why we're doing a deep dive.
But, my Kriegers are cooler than the Cadians because they can fight in trudging wars of attrition lasting decades. Cool flex, bro, but my Cadians would simply win the war in a timely manner. But they're willing to die in the millions to accomplish anything. Newsflash, dummy. You gotta be alive to fight for the Emperor. But my unyielding resolve! Uh-huh. Cadians literally shot at spaceships with lasguns while their planet crumbled at their feet. Shovels! And that, my friends, is what we like to call a straw man. Very effective when I'm the one making the video and no one can tell me I'm wrong. But finally, let's address the War Master Chaos in the room. Yes, Cadia did eventually fall in the 13th Black Crusade. Ha! How could they be the best if they'd lost? Loser regiment. Wrong! Hypothetically, let's consider a pair of jeans. They're purchased by the average Redditor, and for 10,000 years, they're the best pants ever. They're stylish, they're comfortable, and best of all, they don't burst under the, immense aura of the Redditor. But then, one day, the Redditor launches a steamy Blackstone load out of his Eye of Terror, and then the jeans finally rip. Does that make them bad jeans? No.
We're just going to stop for a second, and I didn't pre-watch this video. I have seen Crack Duck, but I haven't seen this video, and the butthole is a common joke. It's the space butthole. It is the Eye of Terror. It is not currently in a Redditor's jeans.
I don't think so. Any force in the galaxy would have eventually faltered after 10,000 years of relentless assaults from literal hell. The fact that the Cadians stood strong for that long is insanely impressive. In the current time, Cadia was lost, but Cadia stands since the survivors of Cadia and Cadians who were deployed elsewhere keep the culture alive and have re-established new colonies to train more shock troops. They continue to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest, regiments in the entire Imperium. Also, anyone who says that Cadia doesn't stand because the planet fell is literally missing the point of the quote. Cadia stands because, just like their other iconic quote says, the people of Cadia literally outlasted their planet and are keeping the culture and legend of their regiment alive. The Cadians took a massive blow with the loss of their planet, but their sheer indomitable human spirit allowed them to live on and continue to serve the Imperium. But with that out of the way, here's a couple of fun Cadian facts. Cadians have purple eyes due to their former proximity to the Eye of Terror. There's a Cadian sergeant named Lucas Bastone.
The purple eyes, from what I remember, was specifically because they were chaos tainted. it made them more resistant to chaos, and I'm pretty sure in the first part of the video it said that. Um, yeah, out of everybody, Cadians are known to just stand there while everybody's going insane. And I'm pretty sure there's a novel that goes into an interaction with Cadians and the Death Corps, where the Death Corps members are just losing their absolute minds, like ripping off their masks, tearing out their eyes, being all crazy. And the Cadians are just looking around like, is this your first time out here?
Who has perfect memory and tattooed the name of every guardsman who ever died under his command underneath his armor. And finally, Cadians also use gallows humor to cope with how sad their lives are.
Same.
So, Gen Z rejoice, Cadians are truly the regiment of the people. But yeah, that's my overview of the best regiment of all time. Feel free to tell me how stupid I am, how boring the Cadians are, and why your favorite regiment is totally objectively better than my favorite regiment. But just remember, everyone always forgets the full quote. A jack of all trades is a master of none, but that's often better than a master of one. Cadians #1, baby. Let's go. Woo!
And that could be true as long as you weren't going up against the Death Corps that just constantly throw wave after you. But this is a research stream, and we're going to be a little objective here. So I'm going to put my bias aside. And that was the Cadians. Yeah, he did a good job on the video. Learned a little bit myself. But now we should probably go see the Death Corps. See it. Oh, and Crack Duck made one as well. So we're gonna watch that so we can compare side by side.
Hi, friends. All right, there it is. The dead corpse of Krieg. He was a good dude. R.I.P. Krieg. Oh, wait, oops. I read that wrong. Today we're going to talk about everyone's favorite guard regiment, the Death Corps of Krieg. The Death Corps of Krieg are excellent warriors and are one of the best, if not the best guard regiments in the entire galaxy. They're also one of the most overrated factions in the entire galaxy.
No.
I mean, let's get into Death Corps of Krieg.
Exactly.
So, basically, shovel, shovel, shovel. I love World War I. Oh boy, a tank. Fix bayonets, fella. Yeah, I mean, I just feel so bad for what my great-great-great-great-grandpa did, and I think the only way I can atone for it is to die in a random minefield, you know?
Yeah.
Of course, I'm just kidding, but of all the factions in lore, Krieg are perhaps one of the most squandered by dumbass Reddit memes and misinformation. But today I will show you the real lore and how they're actually much, much cooler than some suicidal shovel files. So let's get into the World War love child, unrelenting masters of attrition, the Kriegsmen. The Death Corps of Krieg originated on the lovely world of Krieg. And unlike other planets named after war or war derivatives, I'm not even joking this time around. Krieg was a beautiful and prosperous world that was an industrial powerhouse with prosperous trading. But the grand prosperity would become its undoing. The rich, corrupt autocrats of the world were like, ho ho ho, much like the glorious God Emperor of mankind, I am certainly rich and powerful. Wait. And thus, the autocrats of Krieg, led by a chairman who shall not be named, began their takeover of Krieg and succession from the Imperium. The rebelling forces took over most of the planet relatively quickly, and the only real Imperial holdout was on High Farograd, thanks to the effort of the Krieg 83rd and their glorious leader, the soon-to-be legendary Colonel Yurten. Yurten and his loyalist forces were vastly outnumbered with no hopes of reinforcements since no nearby Imperial forces were available. Yurten was told to hold Krieg at all costs by any means necessary. So, basically, the Imperium pulled a restaurant manager during rush hour, telling Yurten, "Oh, sorry, we can't help you here, but good luck, have a fun time." And so Yurten and the boys put up one hell of a defense, but they soon realized that this was a battle they would not win. Magos Griel, an advisor and ally to Yurten, suggested that he use some forbidden arcane dark age technology hidden deep below Farograd, known as huge-ass nuclear bombs. At first, Yurten was hesitant to unleash these weapons since he knew it would almost certainly ravage his homeworld for generations to come, and his other commanders were horrified at this prospect. Some people even sent warnings to the chairman, but he said, "I'm the chairman, not the listen to warnings and quit man." And those warnings quickly went to deaf ears. However, with some goading from Grill and figuring that if the Emperor can't have Krieg, then no one can, Yurden put his plan into motion and prepared the nuclear missiles. Missiles, eh? Kinda like rockets. While nuclear rockets certainly aren't good, you know what is? Today's sponsor, Rocket Money. Rocket Money is an all-in-one personal
Rocket Money.
finance app that helps
We don't
lower bills.
listen to
Cancel
Rocket Money
Rocket Money for
ads.
sponsoring this video. Anyways, back to the less savory rockets. On the day of the Feast of the Emperor's Ascension, which is basically 40k Christmas, Yurden unleashed a crap load of nuclear missiles. Nuclear bombs in the present day are pretty nutty, and Dark Age of technology is like peak nuttiness. So, needless to say, these nuclear bombs that Yurden shot were pretty damn nutty. The Colonel knew that the payloads were overkill, so he had them detonate in atmosphere in hopes of making the apocalyptic damage a little less apocalyptic, which honestly didn't really help in not completely destroying the planet. The nukes bathed Krieg's atmosphere with nuclear hellfire, caused planet-wide storms, and completely annihilated the local ecosystem. The planet was...
See, and that's one thing I didn't actually know. I didn't know that he detonated him early. When I was first introduced to the Death Corps, not specifically Krieg, it goes into the whole backstory of why they are the way that they are. And from what I understood, he launched them, knew what it was going to do, and he wasn't trying to avert catastrophe because he knew this was do or die. And Crack Duck didn't really explain it super in depth, but with the last bastion of Krieg being aligned with the Imperium, everybody else was traitors. I don't think they were aligned with Chaos, but they were definitely just trying to take over the planet and rebel. And looking back on it, if it was the point that he was trying to avert complete catastrophe, he did a really shit job at it and probably doomed the planet because of the radiation fallout. That's the biggest thing with Krieg, and that's pretty much why they exclusively wear masks. It's a radioactive hellscape. There's nothing alive outside of the cities. So hopefully he goes a little more into it, but we'll have to see because it doesn't really seem like there's that much more to learn with that one.
Plunged into a nuclear winter and billions died from the attack. Merry Christmas, heretics. At least it wasn't coal, I guess. Also, once again, nuclear is better than coal. This nuclear strike put the Loyalists and Rebels on equal footing since Yurden's forces were prepared for the strike and took refuge in underground fallout shelters. Wait, Fallout? Is this some kind of guy from Fortnite reference?
No.
So, in nuclear annihilation, the Loyalists found hope. Said hope was promptly crushed when the Imperials let Yurden know they would definitely not be sending reinforcements now that the planet was worthless. What? I thought you wanted Krieg. Well, yeah, I did, but that was before it was a nuclear trash heap. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So, once again, the Loyalists were on their own. The war progressed into a brutal war of attrition defined by its vast trench warfare. Oh my God, trenches! That means shovels! Wah! And yes, speaking of shovels, Kriegers of course use shovels as it's a useful tool, and it's feasible that they may use one as an improvised weapon once in a while. And it would be a pretty cool piece of flavoring since actual World War soldiers use shovels in trenches when bayoneted rifles prove too unwieldy. However, this does not mean that the Krieg's favorite weapon is a damn shovel, and it doesn't mean that they're gonna go shovel a tank the second the opportunity arises. It's just such a dumb meme that literally has no basis in lore. And
they'll take their giant lances with explosives on the tip and hop up on their death horses that somehow also wear gas masks and are robots, depending on which one you're looking at.
It represents why I feel the misconceptions of Krieg lessen the faction so much. It's a cool and interesting idea, parroted into stupidity, thus diminishing itself into surface level trash. But anyways, in this time, Yurden's forces were beginning to be molded into the legendary Death Corps we know and love today. They adapted to the absolutely inhospitable hellscape of Krieg, became masters of attrition warfare, and of course, created their iconic Death Riders, which proved instrumental in the war. The Death Riders arose as the Loyalists needed fast cavalry and their mechanized options were beginning to fail in the Long War. So, the Mechanicus biologists heavily modified some horses into the freaks you see before you now. These freaks were harder, better, faster, stronger than normal horses and had freakish claws that allowed them to tread the wasteland terrains, extra organs to survive the acrid atmosphere, and psycho injections to make them obedient, fearless, and more aggressive. So, these horses fulfilled similar roles as sentinels and are surprising.
Yeah, the horses get drugged out of their mind. Like, they don't feel pain. They can get shot in the chest with, like, bolt rounds, and they'll keep going to the point where they have to essentially be ripped apart before they fall. That's one of the coolest parts of the Death Corps for me, is that they push so hard with every aspect of the faction. But see, you can see right there, explosive on a lance, on a horse. I told you.
Close in durability due to their extensive enhancements. But due to the extensive enhancements, the rider has to constantly monitor their steed and inject drugs to keep it going. If you guys like ketamine, you gotta try what these studs are having. But stemming off of a biological Mechanicus abomination, you may ask, how can an irradiated wasteland of a planet produce enough guardsmen to sustain their endless waves in the wars of attrition? Well, sometime in the hundreds of years of war, Colonel Yurden began to succumb to the nuclear devastation that he unleashed. And on the Colonel's deathbed, Magos Grill suggested that he use the arcane vitae wombs and genetic sorcery in order to ensure the planet was protected by the great warrior even past his death. However, Yurden strongly opposed this abhorrent prospect and died soon after. Unluckily for him, though, the Magos was the only one to witness his death, and he did as he pleased. Don't use the vitae wombs.
What? What was that? I forgot to oil my mechano ears. I think I heard use the vitae wombs, though. If you so wish.
So, Grill used the esoteric vitae wombs. What exactly these are is unknown, but it's implied it's either some kind of cloning machine or genetic editor to make soldiers of Yurden's caliber, or even just a simple artificial incubation chamber. I personally think that the incubator with genetic editing capabilities makes the most sense. There's some evidence for the cloning theory since they almost always wear masks, vitae wombs are taboo, and the Imperium generally doesn't like cloning. Also, some of the Krieg colonels have identified themselves as Yurden long after his death.
Yeah, no. There's another video I watched. God, I can't remember the creator off the top of my head. No, Krieg definitely uses cloning. It's just kept deep underground and hidden away and put in the dark, and nobody ever talks about it, because if your only source of, like, contribution to the Imperium is nothing but soldiers, and you constantly outpace what they expected of you, one would kind of assume that you're using cloning. It also makes it easier for them to get trained in the exact same way and make them so strict of a regimen.
Death. But also, it's not unheard of for soldiers to take on the name of Imperial heroes, so... And there's also compelling evidence against the cloning theory, since there are men and women in the regiment, and Krieg tankers don't actually always wear their masks. It seems most likely to me that the vitae wombs are artificially inseminated to facilitate much faster birth rates, and somewhere along the process they're modified to prevent mutations and introduce favorable traits from notable warriors such as Yurden. Whatever it is, though, we know is suspicious. It allows Krieg to be mass-produced.
It's very suspicious, but the line between the vitae wombs and the cloning process is very hazy at best, and with the Adeptus Mechanicus, it doesn't make it any easier because they're so secretive. Yeah, no. In my learning, and I could be wrong, obviously, but yeah, they use cloning.
And it kind of makes them weirdos. But, weird or not, it was likely vital to the regiment's survival.
Mm-hmm.
So, 15 grueling generations, hundreds of miles of trenches, and billions of lives later, the Death Chaps of Krieg finally won their planet back and returned to the Imperium triumphant. But, upon reporting that the planet was reclaimed, the Imperium didn't really care and just were like, okay, good for you. Make sure you pay your tithes now. And pay their tithes now they did. The Munitorum requested a single regiment from the Krieg, but they sent 20 whole regiments. Furthermore, the commanders of these regiments requested that they be sent to the absolute worst war zones in order to repent for their past sins.
They had something
You
to prove.
see, even though the Kriegers successfully reclaimed their world and weren't even actually the ones who became traitor, they still had immense guilt over their plan's betrayal and the fact that they didn't reclaim it faster. So, they created a cult of sacrifice in which the average Kriegsman saw themselves as simply a resource to achieve the Emperor's will. As such, they have little regard for their own lives as long as it furthers their goals. However, this does not mean that they are suicidal like some other irksome memes like to push. Them being willing to die does not exactly translate to them wanting to die.
Okay.
They want to earn atonement through death, and this means doing something that will help the cause, not just hugging a mine or kissing a berserker. Think about it like this. You have a bunch of bullets, they're expendable by nature. However, you aren't just gonna mag them into some dirt when there's heretics to blast. Krieg are the same
Hit 'em with
way.
a shovel.
They're resources. They're expendable. But they're not to be wasted. Commanders and soldiers who act wastefully and stupidly are loathed by Krieg culture as they are squandering the Emperor's resources. So, generally, the Death Corns are actually quite a tactical force that leverages their extreme numbers to win battles. However, they do tend to sometimes be a bit short-sighted, prioritizing short-term destruction at the expense of the long-term. This can needlessly elongate wars, but luckily, they're used to long, miserable wars. So
That's
it's
what
all
they live
good.
for.
Anyways, after return to the Imperium, being cleared by the Inquisition, and battling in the worst war zones, they proved their mettle and rose to become one of the greatest regiments in the Imperium. The planet of Krieg exclusively exports guardsmen, and the near-endless guardsmen of Krieg are a valuable asset to the Imperium as a disposable hose of men to point at whatever problem they need to extinguish. Krieger trading virtually starts at birth. Young Kriegers have their minds broken and reforged to have an iron resolve, then they're rigorously trained to survive in the harshest of conditions. And if they make it past that, they get to go to the surface of Krieg as their final test. Whoopee! On the surface, they put their trains to the test in the nuclear wastelands. Here, they participated in live fire, mock battles, clear minefields, and learn how to dig trenches. Oh my god! Shovels!
Not gonna
Then,
do that.
when that's all over, they get shipped out to the various war zones of the galaxy. Much like the legendary Cadian shock troopers, the Death Corps are one of the few regiments trusted to field combined arms regiments. This usually comes in the form of their famous siege regiments. The siege regiment's general tactic is to unleash unrelenting artillery bombardments upon the enemy from basilisks, medusas, and even mortars. These artillery barrages can last for months as the Krieg forces hide in fortified trenches until their enemy is crushed. Then, when their enemies are sufficiently broken, they send in endless waves of infantrymen to clean up. Their preferred transport are Gorgon assault carriers, Hades breaching drills, or just a good old-fashioned mass infantry charge.
Yeah.
The Kriegers are most famous for their grim resolve and strong morale in battle. Seeking atonement, they're usually willing to face any of the myriad horrors of the galaxy. I say usually because, once again, unlike their memes and Reddit lore, the Krieg aren't wholly unbreakable. They're still humans at the end of the day, and they have broken in the past and retreated. Also, I could just be mistaken here, so please let me know if I missed it, but to my knowledge, the Commissars being killed by Kriegers for order and retreats thing doesn't really have any basis in lore. The only time I can remember a Krieger killing a Commissar was actually so that they could retreat because they got spooked by the overwhelming Chaos forces on Frax. However, Krieg Commissars do tend to serve a bit of a different purpose in Krieg ranks. Kriegers are usually grim weirdos and, as such, many other regiments are off-put by their presence. So, one of the main duties of Krieg Commissars is to basically convince the other Imperial forces that Kriegers aren't too weird, and to try and coordinate strategies to complement the Krieg's lack of self-preservation. Anyways, another special unit that the Krieg has.
They're basically the translators. They translate Unga Bunga shovel time into actual battle plans. Obviously, it's played up a little bit for a laugh, but yeah, I can't get past the meme of it. It's always so funny.
Have on top of their Death Riders and pretty unique Commissars are their Quartermasters, who are actually kind of similar to Marine Apothecaries in that they're medics and they scour the battlefield retrieving valuables of their fallen comrades. However, to Kriegers, the guardsman himself is not valuable. Their equipment is. So, quartermasters go around scavenging any useful equipment from fallen Kriegers, and they
I mean, that kind of goes every which way for 40k lower as far as the Imperium is concerned. Everything is super valuable because of how hard it is to constantly churn out all of the necessary equipment. That goes for Space Marines, that goes for the Imperial military, and that goes for the special regiments too. As far as I am aware, though, Kriegers are a little more specific. Because they're so heavily based around World War One, it's kind of ramped up. I think it's from All Quiet on the Western Front. There's a scene very early on that the main character is handed his uniform, and the coat he's given has the name of the soldier that died in it before him, but he is kind of confused, and he's like, oh, this must have been somebody else's. And the guy that gave it to him was just like, oh, no, it's not a mistake, this is yours. And he just rips the tag off. That's basically what happens with the Krieg. But they aren't shy about it. They're like, oh yeah, no, it's fine, we'll just make sure it's washed a little bit, get the blood off.
usually drop a quick little prayer for those lost. They also analyze battlefield stats such as ammo usage, casualty rates, and territorial gains in order for Krieg Command to take it into account. Then, we have their Grenadiers, which are the Stormtrooper equivalents.
Yeah.
Unlike the much superior Kazarkin, the Grenadiers aren't specially recruited. Rather, they're made up of veteran survivors of destroyed squads.
Yep.
They're given heavy carapace armor, special weapons, and they're set on suicide missions to lead charges and destroy enemy fortifications. These dudes
Basically, you were rewarded for, hey, you survived, well, we'll give you a little bit more armor, a little bit better of a weapon, but now you got to do more of a dangerous mission. Good luck.
are more similar to heavily armored infantry than spec ops like other stormtroopers, but they still kick ass and they look sick as hell. Honestly, I think they're the second coolest looking stormtroopers. After Kazarkin, of course.
No.
Then next up, we got the Death Corps engineers who break enemy defenses, create trenches and tunnels for subterranean battles, and act as sappers. These guys are equipped with shotguns, mines, and a variety of grenades. And these would be the real shovel men if we must have one. Except more often they're using drills and such. But you know what? I'll give them the shovels this time.
Yeah.
They also utilize the special mole launchers, which shoot breaching torpedoes called moles, which is pretty cute. Also, it seems like GW is merging the engineers with the grenadiers, which, if true, is super lame as they serve different roles and they're cool on their own. But finally, for special Krieg stuff, their lasgun is the Lucius pattern, which trades rate of fire for a more powerful shot. But we all know it's just to fit that World War vibe.
Yep.
Speaking of which, the death crops of Krieg are of course based on the forces of World War I. Not just the German ones, too.
Yeah.
This is another meme that makes them a lot less interesting to me. The Krieg are an amalgamation of every World War force, which is one of the coolest aspects of them. The German influence is obviously the most apparent due to their name, but their uniforms are predominantly French-looking, the helmet is a mix of French and German stylings, they have motifs of German lobster armor, the respirator looks British mixed with other styles, and there's other stylistic things in the infantry and vehicles that allude to other World War armies. But for the most important question of all, do I hate Krieg? No, not really. In fact, I think they're one of the coolest regiments.
Yeah.
I also think it's really cool how they perfectly embody one of the core facets of the Guard with the near infinite numbers and sacrifices. But, as I've alluded to before, I just really hate the memes about them. Just like most memes just reduce a faction to the most surface level observations, and misconceptions actually make them a lot less cool than they actually are. Which also, admittedly, Krieg lore has been somewhat inconsistent with how they're depicted. Sometimes they're basically robot men, other times they're callous but still human. The latter being a lot more interesting to me. Not only does it highlight what makes the Guard cool to me, but it's also the tragedy of a million soldiers trying to suppress their humanity to atone for a sin they didn't commit. I think that is so much more interesting than actual automatons. If I wanted mindless automatons, I'd play Suns, Necrons, or even technically Nids. I personally like the Guard because of the humanity and because it's humans standing up to the wackiness of 40k. But I also know different strokes for different folks, so if you like that, good for you. More power to you. But luckily, Krieg fans are masters of attrition and they can weather the endless waves of dumb memes and misunderstandings for the faction. However, all that said, Cadian is still number one. Woo! But
Well, he can have that opinion. That's totally fine. So we've watched both. We get kind of the basis for it. Let's, you know what? Let's go a little bit farther with it. I think it's this one that I've seen. We're gonna watch the animation of the Death Corps instead of trying to watch it again. It's not always presented in the best way.
Contacting them until we get a reply. Until we get a sit rep on our regiment to our east, we cannot act. Send in reserves to reinforce further down the line. Make sure that flank is held. Call in danger close bombardments if need be.
Sir.
State your number and regiment, Guardsman.
Troop 302-1, messenger from the 301st Krieg Regiment.
Our eastern flank? We've been trying to contact you for the past 3 hours. What's going on?
Our lines have taken heavy casualties, and communications have been cut. Our commander sent my squad to report that the 301st will be withdrawing to the second line due to crippling losses.
Retreating? We have orders to take the Heretic line and secure as much land as possible for the 22nd Regiment inbound. We have to advance. Get our armored platoons ready swiftly. I want Earthshaker rounds raining on their lines until I give the order to stop. Have the Guardsmen ready to go over. Guardsmen, where's the rest of your squad?
Dead, sir.
Very well. Join the lines.
Yes, sir.
Guardsmen! Fix bayonets! Equip bayonets! Be ready for blood!
Then we can go into the fall of Cadia. Oh, wait. No, it's going to try and do some goofy shit. Sorry. Maybe we need to be more specific. That was a decent animation, but that wasn't exactly what I was going for. Anyway, obviously, we have to thank all of the people that I took parts of the videos from, or we were going over before. Goddamn, I'm not happy with that. That's... Oh, not the cosplay. I don't want the cosplay. Crack Duck. Jesus. Yeah, Crack Duck makes a lot of good videos. Anyway, so in my opinion, the Death Korps kind of edge out the Cadians, besides lore and the memes and all the sayings and the camaraderie and all that. I still think that the Death Korps edge them out in most categories besides the tactics. The tactics is probably the one thing that the Cadians have absolutely over the Death Korps, and they're also better equipped. I apologize, but yeah, this is the first research stream, so it's gonna be a little bit hit and miss, and especially with 40K, I'm not the most well versed in it, and the person I'm making this video for wasn't here to try and guide me, but it's okay. I'm not worried about it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. We're going to continue going live after I come back. Thanks, guys.